teaching academic subjects. I'm a scientist, I've got A levels, things like that. Always, I've got underpinning this, these kids are doing well in exams. One must not be, you know, you don't do this and ignore that, that's taken as read. But these underpin that. That's why all this stuff over here, you know, is crucial, because it will be a factor to bear in mind. But you probably realise by this stage, the amount of work I was doing with things like CAMs and so like that became quite large scale, and people were seeing me in a very different light. Which meant that, to be perfectly honest, by, I would say, 95, the big step for me was when I did my MEd, I came across some work by Mayer and Salovey, which is actually emotional intelligence. Now, there'd already been quite a bit from other people, you know, but in 1995, Daniel Goleman brought out a brilliant book, which goodness knows how many copies I bought and given away, and the CDs I bought, done copies and given away. But the essence of it was the, you know, I suppose, some of these skills. I'd already, if you know anything about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, again, if you understand enough about that from the early 80s, 83 that was, that for me was a big step forward, because I thought, well, actually, some of these, particularly the inter and intrapersonal intelligence, are actually skills. He doesn't call them that, you can keep changing the names, but really they were the things that are crucial to any of us being successful or not. So what I tried to do there was to think, well, look, what are we really looking at when we are trying to see in ourselves what we're doing? And this is where it became a crucial part, because to be perfect, by this stage, I'd separated, divorced my first wife. I'd spent 7 years, some would say longer than that, doing everything I could not to, because I had 2 kids. But for me, this came at a point where I'd already gone through that position, and I had to look at myself on a regular basis and think to myself, how well am I learning and coping with this? How well am I communicating? Because the communication problem was a massive problem with me and my wife. So, you know, I know why, you know, what it is now. My daughters would explain that. So, you know, why but this becomes very, very powerful as a tool for yourselves. I mean, self-reflection, you can call it what you will, self-awareness and things of that nature. And they are questions to ask about yourself and other people. But remember, what we're dealing with here are, at the core of it, I call them skills because I'm comfortable with skills, other people aren't. The definition of a skill is in any action or activity that can be learned. That's it. So I like it. But, you know, whatever you want to call it. Now, that's why, from there on in, it became really honing down. And by this stage, I'd been converted, and I was no longer head of year. I was learning project manager, which meant I was basically in charge of teaching and learning, CPD, whatever you want to call it, like that. And I was using lots of different ways in which to try to help that. Now, this was the one which, I'll put it in there in science, but it could be anything there. And those were the questions that I would be asking all the time. And it meant really, for me, the best thing was they would do it on themselves and we would have discussions. To be perfectly honest, the actual tool itself is most effective when you do it on yourself and you do it on somebody else, and then you swap over and you talk about it. And then you do a class discussion. It's called collaborative action inquiry, by the way, the scientific terminology, because then you start to realise that people are using different criteria, and you will find 9 times out of 10 people are actually much better than they will give themselves credit for, because their self-assessment is not very good. And that is the one that really hits home. That's the one you always have to. So I used to take, when I was up north, a living sober group. You can probably guess what they were called that, and similar sorts of groups like that. And that was what we always used to point at, because you could never come off the drugs, you could never come off, you could never do that until they had the ability to develop that, to realise that this is they have a problem. If you don't know you've got a problem, you're in trouble. And you'll see, you know, if you contact me, I used for 20 odd years, you know, quite simply a little model of a person drowning in the deep end of a swimming pool, and it says, quite next to it, it says, if you don't learn to swim, you'll keep drowning. Because basically the idea was, all right, I'm too busy drowning to learn to swim. And that's what most people do, teachers in particular. That when you want them to help, you want to help them most, and you probably gathered by this stage, that became my biggest cohort, mental health, well-being of teachers, you know, and I really became a teacher coach. Because they were destroying themselves, because the way they were assessing themselves was in a perfectionist mode. They would come out, like you do an exam, only thinking the things that didn't go well. It's sad to say, you know, what they should have been able to do is actually do it better, and that's where you have to do that with anybody you're trying to. So when you're supporting people, that's always your starting point. In the last, I suppose, 10 years, well, 10 years, this has become perhaps the most popular in primary schools in particular. This is what, when I go into, any of you come across SEAL, social emotional aspects of learning? It got very bad press. It was treated very, very poorly by most schools, and most people didn't understand it. I was known as the SEAL man in Teesside because I knew more about SEAL, because it fitted in with me. But my approach was completely different to what the government and everyone else was doing. The tools, the resources, brilliant, but the way in which it was used or delivered or was wrong. But it helped me because it gave me an easier way, or a clearer way, of actually helping people to do that. So you end up with the 8 areas, and the terms I kept changing all the time. I've even got different words in there for self-awareness, or one of them. But at the end of the day, it's still the criteria that you're looking for. And again, you can do this tomorrow. When you go back into the classroom on Monday, you can use this straight away. Pick a kid and then just do that. Or you know, you can do it tomorrow or tonight if you want to do it on a partner. But remember, you're going to have to talk to them about it. Because the crucial thing is that when you do this, it's an interactive tool. I know that's phraseologies that they use now, because it's about that interactive, that feedback and that dialogue. So consequently, I was quite fortunate because my daughter had, in about 2005, she decided she wanted to become a teacher. She'd already been doing something else previously, and she focused upon EYFS. Perhaps I had an influence. But if any of you know anything about you, brilliant. When they first came out, and they had the foundation stage profile, if you're not familiar with it, it's a shame because they've changed them anyway. But when they looked at that, I'm going into schools, and I walk into schools. Have you seen, Keith, have you seen this? I said, yes, brilliant, isn't it? You know, and I would overlay that, and I said, these people are finally, actually they use Scandinavian countries to help them with the criteria, but that was really the thing there. The next thing to bear in mind is, any of you come across character? That seems to be this government's in vogue, because it comes from the way in which they used to do it. They do it in public schools. So, you know, several of the public schools, particularly Wellington School, College, been focusing upon character for years. But if you come across a person, James Heckman's the guru, if you like that. But there's KIPP schools, Knowledge is Power, in America, and this book, if you know, brilliant book, absolutely brilliant. It's an American book, Paul Tough, outstanding. Again, if you contact me, I'll give you all a very reading listen to that. But he talks about things. He's just brought out a more recent one, Helping Children Succeed. It's not as good, but he's tried to be a bit more practical about it. But the essence of it is brilliant, because what they are talking about in their terminology is the same, if you like, 8 areas. And again, you can change the name, it's the same thing. They are skills, they are things that you need to learn, you know, and it's important that people realise that given the names, it doesn't really matter. One of the useful things for me in the recent years is when they brought out the OECD, brought out the PISA tables, because they started then in a global sense to focus upon comparisons. And of course, immediately Finland people knew nothing about Finland schools, education, up until that point. Suddenly, when Finland came top of the table, why? What are they doing? Well, if you've ever seen the videos on Finland education, you realise they're doing what I've been advocating or what we should be doing. There they start. They don't even bother assessing the kids, external exams, right up until quite late on. They have primary school style education right up until the age of 14. They focus upon the whole child. And consequently, what these people then did was to realise, you know, these are the things that we've got to be able to do to be successful in the 21st century. And when you look at that, it's the same as I've got on my t-shirt. That's why, for me, you know, my wife would say, well, you've always been nuts, but at the end of the day, you know, even though I'm very, very old now and I have to learn to sit down because I've got a new knee put in here and all the rest of it. You just want to look at that, didn't you? Lovely scar there. But basically, to find ways that finally, I keep saying this, and I say, finally, perhaps the tide is turning and people will realise we're focusing, measuring the wrong things. I keep trying. So, in an attempt, and my wife gave me the idea, she started also about, why don't you write a book, you know, a book that people might read? I said, well, simple, because I don't have those skills. She said, well, I'll help you. She gave me the idea of sliding doors. Everybody see the film? Girl with skills, girl without skills. I wrote it like that, it was terrible. Might have made a good film, particularly if Gwyneth Paltrow was in it, but, you know, different man. So in the end, I went on to this one here, and, you know, and I managed to get the gist of it out there, but can't get any major publishers to take any interest because it don't fit the bill. It's not a great novel, it's really a handbook, but at the end of the day, it tries to do the things there. The crucial thing is, he's then a friend of mine who was a head teacher up in the north, and he said about that. So what about having a practice? So I then had retired, sat down and had another go and another go. That was when I had my operation. And I ended up with a book there. That's Grant's comment there. He thinks it's a wonderful book and he's waiting for me to write the third one. Well, it's 2016, I haven't written it yet, but you know, it'll happen any day now. But the idea is, how do we get this message across? Well, that's why I'm here now. This is one of my latest attempts. He's got 2 minutes to go and he finishes with 2 minutes to go. Right, I've done that there. Questions? Probably exhausted, are you? Just bombarded. No, just give me some feedback, some comments, anything. Don't matter how rude you are, you're really ruder than some of the others I've had over the years.
So you can see, I'm working in EYFS, and you can see where the framework measures up to what you say. Working in EYFS, after coming from a year 5, year 6, year 4 background, you can see how all of that makes so much more sense than what happens in the school, because then they go into year 1 and all that seems to just go.
It's funny, forgotten. That's exactly what I said to my daughter, because she then had to go in and teach in year 1, having done EYFS. She said, Luce, take this with you. I said, look, what makes you so brilliant is the fact that you've had this viewpoint. Don't be conditioned like saying there, take it with you. And I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. Kevin. Kevin, use this, because your expertise, every time I go into primary school, I would say to her, well, who's the EYFS? These are the experts. These are the people you've got to consult with. These are the people. Bring them into your lesson, get them to coach you, get them to show you how to do this. These are the tools, these are the people who practice at it. Use them. Anything else? Come on. You've got to go now. You've got to go now. Thank you very much. Please don't hesitate to email me, use the Twitter feed or whatever. It's been lovely to have an opportunity to talk.